Hi, this is Heather Vokush. I don't know if you know, but there's this dirty little secret stateside right now, and this is the Pentagon's use of military psychological operations, or PSYOPs, on the American public. Now, PSYOPs basically focus on, or psychological warfare focuses on influencing the mind of the enemy as opposed to, killing all of its military. And psychological warfare has things like dropping leaflets and issuing propaganda. Now, U.S. psychological operations involve getting people to support U.S. military policy and, of course, the Bush administration's policies. That's the whole focus of it. And see, the thing, though, is there's something called the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948. And what this said, very specifically, is that the U.S. government is not allowed to use propaganda that is intended for foreign audiences on people in the United States. You're not allowed to do it. But, it happens anyway. Because, the line between civilians and military sometimes gets blurred. Very famously, in 1998 to 1999, the U.S. military had PSYOP, or psychological operations interns, working at both, interning at CNN and National Public Radio, NPR. So a lot of questions were raised. You've got PSYOPs working at, CNN and NPR. What's going on there? So that's got to raise some questions. But in 2003, there was a Pentagon document called the Information Operations Roadmap. Now, this document was approved by former Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, and it was declassified in 2006. And it really just spelled out the U.S. military's approach to exploiting information and also using psychological operations. For example, one famous thing that came out is they said that the Pentagon wanted to fight the net. They wanted to attack the internet to be sure that it worked in U.S. favor, or the Pentagon's favor. They wanted to increase the use of psychological operations. And they also wanted to influence the media so that it reported news that was more beneficial, to the Pentagon and also to the U.S. government. Now, again, the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 says you can't do that. You cannot influence, you cannot put foreign-meant propaganda onto the U.S. population. That's just not allowed. But this 2003 document was very, very interesting. Because what it said, basically, was that, there's a fine line now between what is foreign news and what is news that is based in the States. We've got global news organizations, for example. And so what are they going to do about that? And they also said that there is the distinction between, foreign and domestic news, therefore, is something that would have to be determined by the Bush administration, or, the government in charge. And that's not exactly very comforting, thinking of it that way. So we had an update of the whole issue of psychological operations in 2003. Now, significantly, in 2004, in Iraq, a top U.S. military person there decided to combine the Public Affairs Office with the Combat Psychological Operations Office. You've got Public Affairs, civilian, and you've got Combat Psychological, Operations Office, combining into one so-called Strategic Communication Office. Now, that can't be good. Most recently, there's this thing called the Sentient World Simulation, or SWS. It's this really wild thing. It comes out of Purdue University. And what they want to do is replicate every person on the planet, every institution, every bit of infrastructure. They want to create this kind of parallel universe that is computer-based. And then once they have this, then they want to throw in different external events to see what happens. Okay, so if you've got this world based on our world, what happens if you have political upheaval? What do the people do? What happens if you have a natural disaster, for example? Now, what's very interesting to note, and you can probably guess it in advance, is that the U.S. Defense Department is really interested in this SWS, this sentient world simulation. They're all over it. They have given, well, they have funded it for millions of dollars. And the thing is that the people who came up with this program very clearly stated in their concept paper that this SWS system can be used as an environment for testing psychological operations, for the military to be able to know how its various, elements work. And they also, I'm going to read you a quote from one of this thing. It says, "It will help the military to test multiple courses of action to anticipate and shape the behaviors of adversaries, neutrals, and partners." They want to shape the behavior of adversaries, neutrals, and partners. Well, what's a neutral and a partner? I mean, it sounds like a civilian, basically. And is that a civilian who lives in the States or, only abroad? It's really not very much stated within this SWS. So the whole concept of, psychological operations and military psychological operations is very much under the radar again, but something that we should be looking at. And, domestically, it doesn't help that the Bush administration and Congress have pushed through a number of, orders and laws and signing statements, whatever, making it more dangerous to dissent, making it more legally, a gray area. And also, of course, we recently have this thing, this bipartisan support of surveillance of American citizens. This doesn't help either. It makes you wonder that if our clones in this parallel universe can figure out a way to kind of fight back, against all of this kind of nonsense that is being put on us. Well, I wish they would tell us, because what we're doing now apparently isn't working so well. So the bottom line is that we need to pay more attention to military psychological operations and how they affect us. Now, the Pat Tillman case that's in the headlines, this is classic. You've got this pro-football guy who went to Afghanistan. The military, at first, the Pentagon said that he died from hostile fire in this dramatic gunfight. Well, it turns out, actually, later they said, no, he died from friendly fire, that it was just an accident. And now it turns out the guy was most likely shot from 10 yards away with an M16. And so it doesn't look as if it were an accident. It looks as if he basically were killed. But of course, this information was not given to the public. That's a classic example of misinformation and also psychological operations. So we need to be more vigilant in making the Defense Department and also the media accountable for the misinformation, the misleads, and arguably some of the psychological operations that are being used to help promote a kind of warlike attitude amongst the U.S. citizens. Now, if you're interested in reading more about this, I invite you to read the article. It is called Welcome to the Jungle, U.S. Military Psychological Operations in You. This is Heather Vokush, and I look forward to seeing you next week. The website is www.heatherwokusch.com.